Hi, I'm Professor Williams, and welcome to Biology 1406 Online. This is a summer class, so things are going to move relatively quickly. So I'm going to try to give you a brief overview of the most important things on how to navigate the lab portion of this course successfully. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I will share my screen. And then it'll probably look a little bit strange for a second until I navigate to the appropriate tab. So here, like I said, let me navigate over. And so you should be able to see the main course shell. Not everything has been uploaded at this point, but that's okay. As we progress, you'll see more content available specifically from your lecture instructor. So here, if you navigate to the left-hand menu, at the very bottom of this sort of white section, you'll see 1406 Lab. And this is where you will find all your materials for lab. So there's a couple things to note. There's a lot here. Try not to get overwhelmed. This is a summer session, so things do move at a bit faster pace than your traditional 16-week class. However, I am also used to teaching 8-week classes at another college, so this will be a little bit slower than the pace I typically teach. So here you can see the labs are organized primarily weeks 1 through 10, and each week has a folder. And we'll get back to sort of what's here up top in a little bit. But one of the first things I want to point your attention to is the lab syllabus. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to that. So now you should be looking at the lab syllabus for the summer. And again, it is also organized primarily by weeks. So in this leftmost column, you can see the weeks. One thing to pay attention to is that typically we go through 2 labs a week. So here you can see week 1 in the leftmost corner, and then in the second row you also see week 1. And so these labs can require quite a bit of time, so I encourage you to start them before the day that they are due. So typically, it worked fairly well last semester. What we are going to try to do this semester is have assignments due Monday at 5 p.m. So week 1's assignment, which would be these first 2 rows, will be due the day before class at 5 p.m. So right now it's sort of organized, suggested as sort of like a Tuesday, Thursday format. This is a truly online class. It's just a suggestion. You can work on both labs on Fridays or both labs on Wednesdays. But this is just sort of a suggestion on how to break up the content. However, again, I would highly suggest you do not wait till Monday morning to attempt these labs, knowing that they are due at Monday at 5 p.m. So week 1's lab would be due Monday, June 7th at 5 p.m. So the reason we have labs due at 5 p.m., typically in the past we had them due Sunday at midnight, but then we had most of our questions Sunday at the middle of the night towards midnight. And so for students that waited till the last minute, we were having to answer questions around midnight at, pretty late at night. And so we still encourage you to work on them earlier. And on that note, I generally do not check emails on Sunday. I take specifically a day off out of the week. Online classes, you're sort of expected to always be available 24/7, and over time that can get overwhelming. And so to keep from being burned out, I do not address or answer or troubleshoot problems on Sundays specifically. So you have 6 days a week to get help. If you wait till Sunday, you will most likely will not easily be able to reach me. So on that note, how do you get in contact with me? You can always email me. One thing I did also set up, and this is specifically for our lab, is a section, a Teams section, so Microsoft Teams. Especially when we get to the second half of this semester, I will communicate specifically and exclusively about your lab projects through Microsoft Teams. So that will allow me to organize one shared space where I can have all the communication. In the past, um, material was distributed through email, some on Blackboard, others on Teams, and typically whenever we needed to troubleshoot something, we could never find which place the material was definitively without checking all three places. And especially when there's going to be a lot of back and forth between me and your group, keeping it all organized in teams establishes a hierarchical timeline that can allow you guys to look back at it. So when we're trying to correct, say, an issue with a project proposal, it makes sense if there is a timeline you can look at, as opposed to being confused on whether or not you sent me an individual message or if you sent me a threaded message. So also on Teams, there are direct messages that you can use. There's video calling on Teams. There's video calling on my.tccd, which this semester is backend support is via Blackboard. In the future, it's going to change to Canvas. So for the most part, if it's communication about your group, your semester group project, try to keep that in your Teams, specifically your team channel for your group in the team thread. That way, everyone in your group is constantly updated. And before, in the past, when we organized primarily email, I asked students to CC, basically include all their group members on every single email they sent about the group project, so that everyone had the information. And every single time students forgot. So we're going to try to not use email for group project communication, and instead, well, if you do and you forget, I'll just respond to the email, please address this in Teams. Anyway, we'll talk in a second about that group project. No need to freak out yet. It's the second half of the semester. The first half of the semester is looking at techniques and learning and picking up new skills, primarily involving cell and molecular biology. So each week you're looking at a different aspect of it. And specifically, so in this column are the topic lessons. It's sort of descriptive about what you're doing in the lab. The actual name of the lessons are slightly different, but again, it will be the lessons in those folders. What I do recommend is that you do not jump ahead to weeks in the future. That will give me time to correct any issues in upcoming weeks and make sure that's all set. So you can work on, for the most part, I expect minimal changes because again, this is just a condensed down version of what we had the previous semester, long semester in the spring. So these topics, they're going to link to semi-interactive, customized labs. They're hosted back in by SoftChalk, so you may hear me refer to them later on as SoftChalk lessons. And then these lesson quizzes, they are embedded into the SoftChalk lessons themselves. So one key note about that is that SoftChalk has this sort of weird caveat that if you review the content or if you attempt it more than once, you have to complete it all and hit submit on the last page, or else it will override your previous attempt as a 0. It's a weird thing. It's super frustrating. Wasn't a big problem last semester, but the previous semester it was. So just make sure if you go back, because those lessons have a lot of factual and technical information in them, it's important to make sure that you actually don't accidentally override your previous grade. And so so exactly what causes it, it's not clear. But for sure, one thing you should not do is answer some of the questions on a subsequent attempt and not actually answer all of them again. So if you're redoing especially the quiz portion of it, make sure you're not actually clicking through those answers, because that's going to accidentally override your previous grade. And so those are the lesson quizzes. And then, so those are embedded inside the lesson. And then after your soft chalk lesson, you have what's called post-lab analysis or after-lesson analysis. It's basically more of a traditional quiz slash test where you only have one attempt, and these are going to be remotely proctored. And so you have to use Chrome web browser specifically. And so you'll actually go through it in your intro lab, how exactly to set up this secure remote proctor. One thing, you have to provide an ID, show it to your web camera, and also you have to have a webcam or web camera as well. But again, you'll go through all this in your first lab. It'll walk you through this, and there'll actually be a practice lab, practice post-lab analysis too, to make sure you have everything set up correctly. So once we get about halfway through all of the labs, we'll start looking at working on our semester-long project. So this is going to be based off of something similar to what you guys learned or discussed about in your previous labs. This is a cell and molecular lab, so your group project is expected to deal with some aspect of microbes. So it doesn't necessarily have to be bacteria, but it could be fungi, it could be protists, as long as it's single-celled, hence the cell and molecular biology aspect. And you're expected to manipulate a variable and then measure the response and sort of present that as an experiment. And so once we get to your experimental proposals, because you guys can't really grow bacteria or microbes in your house, we're going to use your experimental design to essentially perform it behind the scenes for you, or generate some of that data depending upon what exactly you propose, and then hand you back that data. You're going to analyze it, and then you're going to write a scientific research paper over your whole project. And then you'll also do a poster presentation over your project as well. But don't freak out about it. We'll basically approach it sort of a week at a time. Because this is a summer session, we don't have as long to do it. So you guys have to be really responsive, especially in these first few weeks, week 6 and probably 5, 6, and 7, when we are establishing the groups and working through that first experimental plan proposal. It's important that you stay in contact with me and basically check Microsoft Teams. And so I would suggest you try downloading it on your phone and enabling push notifications. I have it downloaded on my phone and it works fairly well. And so you'll have to sign in with your Tarrant County login, the same one you use to get onto my.tccd/Blackboard. And so it's incredibly important that you communicate in real time. Last semester, we had issues where students communicated on a weekly basis with me instead of a daily basis. And not all groups were communicating every week. And so when it came to that experimental proposal, we had to sort of guess what the experiment was about. And so the data they got didn't actually reflect the project they planned on doing. And in other cases, they had a critical flaw in their experiment and they didn't address it. So we gave them data that essentially meant absolutely nothing, and they had to write a paper over a project that they essentially completely failed and got no results over. So again, I'm going to be communicating with you on a regular basis, potentially on a daily basis those weeks, trying to iron out the details of those projects. And so what I'm now going to do is jump ahead. And so, oh, when I talked about your paper here, so typically it's organized by weeks, but when it comes to submitting those papers, those submission links tend to get a little bit lost for students. So I put them out here in the default directory. And so it both gives you links to submit your first draft and your second draft, or your initial draft and your final drafts, sometimes plural, again, depending upon how well you communicate. And if you're communicating on a timely basis, you may end up needing to submit more than one final draft. There may potentially be an option for corrections to happen, even on that second part of your paper. But again, it's a summer class, so it depends on timely communication, whether or not we have time to actually make edits. And so the other thing is, really, I would check out those resources and check out the rubric for both part 1 and part 2, because that's how I grade your paper. It can be a good paper, but if you're missing the aspects the paper wants you to talk about in that rubric, you can't get a really good grade on it. So again, make sure you check out that lab syllabus. You may want to print it out and put those due dates on the calendar. And then one other thing to note is that occasionally, you know what, I don't think we have it on this syllabus, but okay, so essentially, here we go. You have, I think this is the only part, the only thing that has an asterisk on it. Normally all your stuff is due Monday, 5 p.m. Your final research paper is due earlier in the week, and then I would say, at least for your, what is it, your research proposal, whenever that is due the first time, so week 4, we actually start to discuss it. I just asked that you, if any corrections I asked for, that you get back, get those back to me like same week, preferably within a few days, so that when it comes to your week 5 proposal presentation, that you're not making a proposal off of an incomplete or incorrect project. And so those are the, I think those are the only two things where you may need to communicate back and forth with me earlier in the week and not wait to that 5 p.m. deadline. Because you actually, yeah, here it is in week 4 again, like you start your experimental plan, but that actually needs to be approved and vetted by me. And then even after you submit your plan, when that information is forwarded to the lab staff, they may actually have some additional questions for you, which I need you to get back to me on within like a few days in order for your project to progress correctly. I think I've basically aggregated their most common questions from previous semester. And so if you fill out the experimental plan proposal correctly, it's unlikely they're going to have any questions for you. But one big thing from last semester is that students didn't, for some reason, didn't completely fill out their proposal and just skipped a bunch of questions. And so it was unclear exactly what kind of experiment they wanted to do. All right, so let's jump into a folder. Let's just look at week 1. And so here you're going to see one of those lessons that I talked about. And so depending upon the topic name, so let's look at the syllabus again. So here, because so here it talks about intro, safety, eukaryotic cells, and prokaryotic cells. That's all combined in this one link. But in subsequent weeks, you may see more than one. So here in week 2, it's split off into 2 separate modules, but they both are due in week 2. Okay, so let's jump back to week 1. I'm going to look at this combined lesson. Up here, you'll see checklists. It should cover everything you need to do that week. And also make sure that you're scrolling down all the way to the bottom. There's this weird thing where, depending upon like how you have your screen zoomed in, you may not notice that there's additional content to scroll down. So just make sure you've scrolled all the way down to the bottom. And so this is a link to the soft chalk lesson. Before I click on that, there's something super important that I need to talk about, and it's something that to me was kind of obvious, but I realized last semester not every student understood this. So when it comes to Blackboard, when you need to submit something to me, like upload something to your computer and submit it as a graded assignment, you're actually going to have this symbol here that looks like grid paper, a ruler, and a pencil. If you click on that, it will actually take you to a spot where you can browse your computer and submit something for this assignment. So that symbol means that you can submit and upload something. And then, so you have to click on the name of the assignment, and let's go to another week, and I'll show you another example of that. So week 2, see, let's try the second one. All right, so what I'm looking for will make sense once I find it. You know what? Actually, I'm going to go to try. Oh, I guess we're just going to go through all the weeks till I find it. No big deal. This will only take a second or so. Or alternatively, if I don't, okay, here we go. So again, you have grid paper, and you have a ruler, and you have a pencil. So you click on the name in bold of the assignment, and it will take you to a spot where you can upload the submission. But if you click on the file attached, it will download the instructions or the assignment you need to complete. And so download the file, and you'll get the file that you need to fill out. Click on the actual name, and it will take you to a spot where you can submit it. So that's something that's relatively simple, but again, it's not super obvious if you've never used Blackboard before. Okay, so going back to these symbols, this where it has a white sheet of paper and a globe of what appears to be planet Earth, that's a joke. It's obviously Earth. Anyway, moving on. That actually is going to take you to a website. So that's a symbol if the link is clickable to take you to a URL. And then this third symbol is a sheet of paper with X's, checks, and a pencil, and sort of tiny squares. That will actually take you to a test / quiz. And so the 3 symbols, there's probably more, but these are the 3 main common ones, help you distinguish what the content is before you even click on it. And so here I'm going to show you an example of one of those soft chalk lessons. So here we're on the soft chalk lesson. Here at the top it's called softchalkcloud.com, so that's why I call it a soft chalk lesson. Here there's always an overview, and there's different sort of content. that it talks to you about. There's pictures, sometimes there's embedded videos, and then here we have those in-lesson quizzes I was telling you about. And so here up in the top right, it tells you what your score is and what your total score can be. And so you basically have to make sure that you go through and you actually hit an answer for all of these, select an answer, and then hit check answer. And at some point, it may ask you, when you've gone through all of them, to make sure that it may give you a confirmation screen of some sort. Verify that you want to submit it. It's not necessarily going to do that for me because this isn't the instructor view. But if it asks you for that, make sure you click it through, and you're clicking through all the way. Some of these, again, may link to a video, and other times it may link to, say, like a PDF that has instructions for you to download for, say, like your research paper. All right, so that was a lot, and try not to get overwhelmed. I say map it all out. If you are a visual learner, print out a calendar or write it on a calendar. Whatever you need to do to sort of organize it yourself, and then stick to, so keep a copy of the syllabus somewhere important where you'll likely to run across it to help remind you when things are due. For the most part, things are all due by Monday at 5 p.m. Two exceptions on the syllabus where you need to submit something earlier than that, which I talked about earlier in the video. One of them is the final paper, and the other one may have to do with the experimental plan. I don't recall. So it's a lot, but if you just take it sort of a week at a time, it's pretty manageable. Again, make sure you devote enough time to these labs so you're not trying to do it at the last minute. And so these in-lesson quizzes, the soft chalk quizzes, do allow multiple attempts. If you notice some weird error where only your lowest score is being taken or your average score is being taken, just shoot me an email. It's just a weird setting I need to adjust. But I'm going to try to make sure I have that adjusted on all of them. And so by default, it likes to take your like first score. We actually want to give you more than one chance. So it should be set at taking your highest score. And then for your post-lab analysis or your after lesson quiz, you only get one attempt for those. They are remotely proctored. They are timed. And so I have it set at a fairly lenient setting. You are allowed to use your lab notebook. So your lab notebook, which is an external physical notebook where some lessons ask you to write answers to, but you won't necessarily be turning it in. So you can actually write notes and take notes to use for that post-lab analysis or post-lesson quiz. That you only get one attempt to. It's timed. Some of them you have to upload a document for. For those in which you have to upload a document, it's also timed. There's a tendency for students to get kicked out when they attempt it, but whatever it asks you to upload, make sure you have that, say, like saved on your desktop of the device you're taking the quiz on, so that you can quickly open it and upload it within like a few seconds. Say shoot for under 10. But if you find that it's, say, like on your tablet and you're taking the quiz on your computer, you're not going to have enough time for you to, say, like Bluetooth it across or email it to you and open it. No, you have a couple seconds. Again, it's an anti-cheating device, which we are required to do as a condition of having these classes online. So it's not a me thing. It's whichever instructor at Tarrant County you take it with. So, all right, I think that's it. That's a lot of content. Email me if you have questions. Other than that, I guess I'll see you in email, Teams, office hours via Blackboard, Collaborate Ultra, or wherever we find ourselves. So, all right. See you guys later.